And so do you think that teaching in executive education is a big challenge?
I think there's challenges at all levels. I think, on the one hand, when you think about young students, normally they are just in the process when they are developing their own thinking, knowledge. They are getting their arms around different concepts and topics, and so you are helping them in becoming grown-ups, professionally speaking, and that's a very important and very serious issue, right? Because it's not only knowledge and skills that you develop, but also embedded in education. There is the issue of attitudes and beliefs and values and so on and so forth. So it's really a responsibility on the one hand. When you deal with executive education, on the other hand, so professionals in active, what you discover as well is they have interests which are very much in the short run. They need to deliver results. They have the complexities they face on the management area, and what they need is really approaches, tools, frameworks to really solve the problems they have at hand. So it's a different setting. It's not that you are helping them in building up their personalities, professionally speaking, but it's really solving specific issues, and that's probably one of the main differences. Both of them are very complex by themselves. Now, in executive education, the challenge, given what I described, is that they are not as easy, they do not absorb that easily all the things that they observe as, for example, young students who are just in the process. They are like sponges, they just absorb everything and so on and so forth, but it's the contrary. Normally they reject. So the natural trend and bias that all of us have is when we receive some information that contradicts our own beliefs or our own experience, we tend to reject it. It's natural, and there's so much to fast, and we know that much already from research and practice. That's one. So the question is, how do you overcome that and make sure that whatever you are doing with the executives in executive education does really have an impact on what they do, and they understand that the things are more complex than just the easy, quick solution. It's much more into that. So I think there are two ways. On the one hand is fundamentals. So it's getting back to the basics. It's amazing how much as we develop our professional careers in life, sometimes we just forget about the fundamentals in many fronts, personally speaking, professionally speaking. Whenever we face a situation that is difficult or a crisis, you call it whatever that is, probably one of the best advice is step back, get back to the fundamentals. And again, that's a strategic thinking. Okay, let's see, what's the situation, what's the long-term trajectory, what should I be, what's my competencies, resources, who can I work with, and so on and so forth. So it's the same logic. That's number one. And I would say the second is, sometimes when you deal with these companies, you have two types of different organizations. Normally organizations which are very much proud of themselves. That means they do so well, they just want to talk about themselves. And I've seen that in industries, and I will say something that is public, I'm sure no. But normally, if you look at the pharma industry, they're very endogamic. Pharma industry, they really think very highly about themselves for a reason. And normally, they want to discuss their own cases and see best practices is one type of activity. So, well, in my experience that I've worked with a number of them, is actually try to make sure that one way or the other, we expose them to different settings, realities, context, cases, and so on and so forth. That's number one. The other extreme is organizations which pay too much attention to the outside. Everything is better on other firms, everything managed better, opportunities are greener here and there. And so sometimes it's actually more interesting to expose them to their own history and trajectory. And just by that specific conversation, engaging into that, what you can see is that there is a much more interesting way of discovering and untangling very complex issues. I had an experience with that in which one very large organization, globally speaking, one of the top 10 in their industry, they wanted to develop a very specific executive education program to train their future managers. And the question is, how do we do it? In the case of this very large firm, in the end, what we did is we took a historical perspective. We wrote a specific paper on their trajectory and the strategic decisions they made with the pros and the cons, things they did well, things they didn't do so well. And it was very useful to help them in just by contrasting to what their own trajectory and their decisions to see the merits of the strategic choices they made. And that was really, really useful.